All right, let's jump right in. Today we are diving into a really fascinating idea, a connection between two philosophies from, completely opposite ends of the world. It's a story that stretches across centuries, and it's all based on this concept called the Way of ZenStoa.
So, here's a question to get us started. What if one of the most iconic Eastern philosophies out there, Zen Buddhism, wasn't, 100% Eastern? What if its secret ingredient was something else entirely?
Yeah, that's the big idea we're tackling today. The possibility that the very foundations of Zen were actually shaped by Stoicism, an ancient Greek philosophy that somehow made its way all the way to China. Now, I know that sounds a little out there, but stick with me because the evidence is actually surprisingly strong.
To really get this, we have to start by pulling on a thread you might not expect. We need to question the official origin story of Zen. The one many of us have heard. We got to look at its legendary founder and see if that story really holds water.
You heard that right. That legendary story of the mysterious monk from the West, Bodhidharma, who supposedly brought Zen to China, well, modern scholarship is pretty much in agreement that he was a legend. A powerful story for sure, but likely not a real historical person.
So you have to ask, why? Why make up this whole character? Well, it seems it was a way for China to create its own homegrown version of Buddhism, something that felt uniquely Chinese, not just an import from India. Giving this new school, what they called Chan or Zen, its own legendary founder was a genius move to make it legit.
But here's the thing. Just because Bodhidharma might be a myth doesn't mean the story is meaningless. Not at all. It might actually be a massive clue, pointing to a huge exchange of ideas that happened along one of the most famous routes in all of history.
Think about it. The legend is about a Westerner bringing a new philosophy to the East. That could just be a story symbolizing a real historical fact. The Silk Road wasn't just for moving silk and spices. It was basically the internet of the ancient world. It was a superhighway for ideas, for culture, for philosophy.
And just look at the timeline here. We're not talking about a small window of opportunity. We are talking about 900 years. Let that sink in for a second. That's a massive amount of time for ideas to travel, to morph, and to find new homes.
Let's just walk through it. So Stoicism gets its start way back in the 3rd century BC in Greece. Then you have the Silk Road, humming along for over 1,000 years, connecting everybody. And then, bam, in the 5th century AD, Zen pops up in China. The timeline doesn't just make it possible, it almost makes it feel inevitable.
Okay, so the timing works, the geography works. But that's all just circumstantial, right? Where's the real evidence? Well, it's hidden in plain sight. It's in the teachings themselves. When you put the core ideas of Stoicism and Zen next to each other, the similarities are kind of staggering. Let's look at 7 of them. Pillar number 1. Virtue is everything. For the Stoics, the whole game was about living a virtuous life. Wisdom, courage, justice, you know the drill. For Zen, it's about perfecting your actions, your speech, your way of life. The language is a bit different, but the core message is identical. Being a good person isn't just nice, it's the entire point.
Next up, this idea of detachment. The Stoics had a word for it, apatheia. Now that does not mean apathy, like you don't care. It means being free from being yanked around by your emotions. Zen calls it renunciation or non-attachment. It's the same idea, finding a calm center that doesn't get rocked by every little thing that happens outside of you.
And that leads directly to this, accepting reality on its own terms. Zen has this absolutely beautiful word for it, suchness. Things are just as they are. Reality is what it is. And that sounds an awful lot like the Stoic command to accept the things you cannot change, doesn't it?
I mean, listen to this quote from the Stoic master Epictetus. If you told me that was a Zen master speaking, I would 100% believe you. It's the same teaching, crystal clear. Peace comes from acceptance, not from fighting reality.
Both of these traditions are also obsessed with finding balance, what they call the middle way. For Stoics, it's about finding that sweet spot between pure logic and raw emotion. For Zen, it's about balancing your rational brain with a deeper, intuitive wisdom, sometimes called no mind. But the goal is exactly the same: avoid extreme.
And of course, there's mindfulness. The Stoics practice something called animadvertere, which is like stepping back and being a neutral observer of your own thoughts. Zen takes it maybe a step further. It's about becoming one with the action. So you're not a person sweeping the floor, you just become the sweeper. It's 2 different doorways into the same room, the present moment.
All right, this next one sounds kind of weird, but it's incredibly powerful. Both philosophies tell you to think about the worst-case scenario.
The Stoics did it so they wouldn't be shocked when bad things happened and so they'd appreciate what they had right now. Zen uses it to help people realize that most of the things they're afraid of are just stories in their own heads.
This famous Zen saying just nails it. By accepting that the cup is already broken, that its fate is to one day break, the master can enjoy it completely, right here, right now, without clinging to it. That's negative visualization in its most beautiful form.
And finally, how do you do all this stuff? It all comes down to the seventh pillar, self-discipline. The Stoics called it disciplina. In Zen, it's just called practice. But for both, it's the understanding that wisdom isn't something you just get. It's something you build, day by day, through consistent effort.
So let's zoom in on that middle way idea for a second, what the Stoics also called the golden mean. Because this wasn't just some abstract idea for them. It was a skill, something you had to train for, like an athlete.
And get this, look at how they trained. Both traditions used meditation for sure, but also debate and even logic puzzles, like the famous Zen koans. And they both relied heavily on this method of questioning, where a teacher guides a student to their own answers. It's like they were working from the same playbook.
Okay, that was a lot of ancient history. Super interesting, right? But so what? What does any of this mean for us living our lives right now? Well, it suggests that there's this powerful, unified philosophy, what the source material calls ZenStoa, that is perfect for the modern world. And this is really the big takeaway. This blended Zen-Stoic path is so useful because, especially for those of us in the West, it connects these amazing Eastern practices back to our own philosophical roots. It's not about joining a monastery, it's about self-study, about thinking things through, and most importantly, about actually applying these ideas to your real, everyday life. So it really leaves you with this one last thought. You've got these two ancient paths starting on opposite sides of the planet, thousands of miles and hundreds of years apart, yet somehow, they seem to be climbing the exact same mountain. Which really makes you wonder, when you look at these core ideas, virtue, acceptance, mindfulness, have you, without even realizing it, been a Zen Stoic all along?